So I played over 35 hours of Immortals Fenyx Rising over the past week. I had a ton of fun in it, and I will give another big thank you to Ubisoft for sending me a review copy beforehand. But there's a ton of stuff to do in the game, a ton of secrets waiting for you to discover them, which is why I kinda wish that somebody told me about these in advance in my first playthrough. And that is why I'm bringing you guys today's video with the most important things I wish I knew before playing Immortals Fenyx Rising. As always, if you enjoyed this video at any point, it would be super awesome if you left a like on it, and let's jump right into it. First things first, exploration is going to be extremely important in this game. Not only will you want to get off the beaten path and maybe get lost in the beautiful open world of Immortals, but there's also a ton of rewards waiting for you out there just to discover them. Now, by default, each of the zone maps is covered by a fog of war, and in order to reveal these, you will need to head over to each of the god statues in the middle of these zones, climb at the top, and then kind of do this synchronization gameplay that is also similar to the ones in Assassin's Creed. Of course, you only need to do this once, and then it permanently unlocks a quick fast travel point. Oh, and by the way, I definitely suggest you go ahead and probably even unlock the 4 major zones around the one in the middle, so that you can quickly access these later down the line when the story missions will eventually bring you there as well. Which brings us to number 2. As soon as you unlock a zone and you're at the top of the statue, go ahead and use your Far Sight ability. Now, by default, this is the button V on the keyboard, but what this does is that it lets you scout ahead and reveal points of interest on the map. This can be anything from epic treasure chests that can give you amazing loot, vaults that kind of act like dungeons, challenges, and a ton of other things in there as well. The easiest way to do this is to simply glide your cursor over the screen until you see it shine, and once it does that, you can easily pinpoint the target and reveal it both on your screen as well as on your main map. Moving on, next, we've talked about exploration, but let's also talk about your main base of operation. So immediately after finishing the introductory sequence, you reach the Valley of Spring, and soon after you will reach this point right here with the Hall of the Gods. Well, this is going to be your main base and pretty much where all the character related upgrades are being handled. This includes everything from upgrading your character's health and stamina, the forge to upgrade your gear, buying skills, changing character appearance, and so on and so forth. Let's begin with your character and all of its upgrades, because this is going to include a ton of other materials and resources too. So the first one is going to be your character's health. This is something that you upgrade at the Kylix using a resource called Ambrosia. So Ambrosia is a rainbow color looking crystal that can usually be found at the top of structures as well as other really high up places, so definitely use that Farsight ability to spot these from really far away. Next, there's your stamina upgrade. This is done through the Bench of Zeus, also in the Hall of the Gods, and you're gonna be using a resource called Zeus Lining. Now, to get this, it's really easy. All you need to do is to complete a Vault of Tartarus, and you will get 1 for each of the vaults that you complete. So there's going to be at least about 50, if not even more, vaults in the game overall, and you will definitely want to complete as many of these as possible if you want to upgrade your stamina. Finally, for your character, we have the perks, and you can unlock additional skills and abilities through the cistern using something called Coins of Charon. Now, to get these coins, you need to basically complete something called myth challenges, which appear with the golden icon right here on the map. There's multiple types of myth challenges, and this includes anything from racetracks to puzzles, guiding arrow challenges, and a ton more in there too. So definitely go ahead and complete these, as this will give you access to both new skills for your character as well as godly powers. More on that in just a little bit. Once you're done with that, this brings us at your equipment, because you will also want to upgrade this as well, and in fact this will also play a huge role in how well you will fare in combat, especially as you progress through the game. So first of all equipment in the game, all of the categories can be upgraded at the forge in the same Hall of the Gods. This includes your weapons, your armors, your arrows, potion capacity, and so on and so forth. Now, in Fenyx Rising, you don't just upgrade individual item pieces, but rather entire categories, which means that if you upgrade your weapon category, this is going to affect both your current and your future weapons when you get them. And by the way, the difference between even one level of upgrade to another can be quite massive, so definitely go ahead and level these up. Now, all equipment upgrades in the game will use a mix of red, blue, yellow and purple shards. And even though I could break these down piece by piece, I will only say this. This is something that you get mostly from opening chests. It doesn't matter if it's a simple chest, an epic one or a guarded chest, that's gonna give you all of these, well, shards and a piece of gear on top or a skin too. Also on the same note, at level 4 upgrade with the weapon or the armor category, you will unlock secondary, usually more powerful perks on these pieces of gear. So if you were wondering why it shows a locked button over there over the secondary stat, it's because you need to reach level 4 with that category. This also brings us to the category of potions. I'm not gonna stay too much on these ones because they are pretty self-explanatory, but what I will say is this: whenever you're seeing a plant on the ground, like the blue, red, purple or yellow ones, definitely go ahead and pick them up, because eventually in the game, and especially if you're trying to fight something like a legendary world boss or a mythical boss, you will want those potions at hand. And not just that, potions can also be upgraded to provide further benefits beyond their initial scope. Like for example, a damage potion can be upgraded to also provide additional stun, or for example a defense potion can be upgraded to provide damage reflect when enemies attack you, and there's a ton of other stuff in there too. And by the way, you upgrade these using a resource called Ember, and you can get this for the most part from opening up chests and from just breaking down trees, since yeah, they can also hold that resource. Moving on to number 5, let's talk about some really useful combat tips that will help you in the game. So of course, your main melee weapons, once you unlock them, are going to be your one-handed sword and your two-handed axe. Now for the first part of the game, I definitely recommend you go ahead and use the axe as a kind of opening move, in a really good way to also stagger enemies way quicker. And once the enemies are staggered and stunned, then you can jump right in and do some quick sword attacks, since later down the line you will also get some perks that will reward you more stamina regen upon hit with the sword against stunned enemies. So this is like how I usually proceed in the first part of the game. Then there's also dodging and parrying. This is another very strong point that you need to use, and eventually even kind of upgrade with counter attacks and whatnot. Now for the most part, both of these seem to behave very similarly to recent Assassin's Creed games, like especially the dodge. It does slow down time and all of the enemies really hard when you do a perfect dodge. So you will want to do this because this opens them up to a lot of incoming damage. And the same goes for the parrying. The parrying is also really strong. For the most part, you can kind of parry 9 out of 10 attacks, with the exception of the ones that kind of make your enemies to glow red. So in that case, your only option is to dodge, but for the rest of them, it's super easy to just parry everything and quickly come up with a ton of incoming damage. Again, there's a ton of perks that provide counterattack abilities if you unlock them, and eventually you will definitely want to do that. Now at number 6, we have the godly powers, and as I've said, this is the second type of skill category that your character has access to. These are magical abilities that you unlock at various points in the main story, and eventually can also further expand using those coins of Charon I was talking about. There's going to be 6 of them in total, but for the most part only 4 of them are actually used for combat, while the other 2 are usually used for just completing puzzles. So this includes Phosphor, which is kind of like your Phoenix bird that you unlock really early on in the main story, then Hephaestus hammer, Athena's dash, and finally Ares wrath, all of which actually provide some really amazing combat capabilities. Now these of course will consume stamina, so be careful with that, especially like the Phoenix bird will consume a ton of stamina. So whenever you're using this in combat, be mindful of your current stamina level, otherwise you might risk not having enough to dodge a otherwise very powerful incoming enemy attack. That being said, these are extremely powerful abilities that eventually, once you get more stamina, you will use to mix between one another or between this and the regular attacks to absolutely overwhelm and destroy the enemies in very fun kind of ways. Moving on to number 7, we've talked about your character. Let's also talk about your activities, like what will you do in this game once you get all of this cool kind of stuff. Well, first of all, the Vaults of Tartarus is something that you will do quite early on in the game, and quite often, since there seems to be at least 100 of these on all of the maps combined. They kind of look like pits of hell from afar because they are literally that, pits to another dimension where you kind of do a mix of puzzle solving and enemy fighting. And of course, occasionally some really big boss fights, but I will not spoil anything in this video. As I've said, this is the main source of Zeus Lightning, that you need to upgrade your character's stamina, but it doesn't just stop there, because you will also want to uncover and open the chests inside of them, since they are very useful at providing additional gear, crafting pieces, but even more so, secret unlockables that you use to craft additional secret armors that are very useful. So I will talk about that in a different kind of video. Next, we have the open world bosses. There's a ton of boss type enemies in the game, a ton of minotaurs, a ton of cyclops, and other big types of mythical creatures, but the most threatening will be the legendary bosses. Well, technically speaking, there is another level on top, which is the mythical bosses, but we will talk about that in a different video. Now, legendary bosses are really big, usually extremely strong, and they only tend to spawn in fixed locations on the map. Since they are very large, you can easily see them from afar, but you kind of need to keep an eye out for them. Engaging with them is really difficult, so try to bring your A game, but they are very useful because they can be, well, quite rewarding in the sense that they usually provide really awesome skins for your wings or really awesome upgrades for your Phoenix bird. The third piece of exploration is going to be made out of these chests. So chests are going to be extremely abundant on the map. There are about 4 categories from the top of my head. This includes regular ones, epic chests, even guarded chests, and finally another category, night chests, that only spawn during the nighttime. So all of these can provide anything from crafting materials to pieces of armor that you will definitely want, especially as early as possible. And yes, again, you can easily see them with the far side and mark them on your map. And the final activities are going to be made out of these myth challenges. As I've said, there's multiple unique ones in the game, and some of these might include a kind of race type of challenge where you have to run through an obstacle course and reach in that allotted time. My favorite, of course, are these arrow guided challenges where you kind of have to shoot your arrow through a bunch of hoops and then reach the end of it by going through a series of obstacles. But there's more on top, like frescas where you have to like kind of do these puzzles, or even harp ones where you have to do this song and kind of mix it with the ones around the harp. So that's a little bit more complicated, but we will talk about that in another video too. Finally, this brings us to the 8th point on the list, and this is gonna be all about daily missions and challenges. Definitely go ahead and complete these if you want additional resources and even more so additional items that you get along the way. So basically, there are 2 types of missions on these 2 sides of this tablet. So basically, on the left side we have the heroic tasks. These are basically kind of like challenge tracks with 10 levels. As you complete more in these levels, eventually you get better and better upgrades all the way up until the 10th level that gives you some really unique rewards like a nice piece of armor. They also, by the way, apply retroactively, so if you already completed the challenge that hasn't yet appeared on your tablet, if you unlock it eventually, yeah, this will automatically complete. On the right side we have the life tasks, and this is something that you do daily and weekly for a resource called Electrum. So yeah, you will definitely want to complete these, especially the weekly task that gives you the most amount of points, especially if you complete it with the gold medal. So eventually you can buy some of these really awesome cosmetic items from Hermes at the Hall of the Gods. But yeah, this is pretty much it with the biggest things that I wish I knew before playing the game. Of course, there's many more in the upcoming days that I will cover here on this channel. So if you want to see more Immortals Fenyx Rising videos here on this channel, go ahead and let me know by simply leaving a like on this video, subscribing and activating that notification bell, and I'll see you guys in the next one.